Okay, I'm opening the room up so people can come in. There's 11 people in the waiting room.
Okay, are you making us host too so we can let them
Yes.
in? Okay, thanks.
Good afternoon, everyone. We're going to give a couple more minutes for folks to trickle in, and then I will put some information in the chat. Buenas tardes todos. Vamos a darle a la gente 2 o 3 minutos más para entrar al cuarto y entonces yo voy a poner información aquí en el chat en inglés y en español. Gracias.
Hi, Velma. You're on mute, Vilma.
Yes, thank you for coming in, everyone. You too, Agnes.
Thanks.
If I may ask, who are our translators for today?
Hello, my name is Oscar Ramirez. I'll be one of the interpreters helping with interpretation today. Nice to meet you all.
Thank you. Let me ask that question again. Who are our interpreters for today? Thank you for educating me on the difference yesterday, Oscar. I appreciate it.
No problem. It's a common mistake, but you know, it's okay.
Oscar, is there someone else that's doing interpretation with you?
I believe Sarah Vielma is going to be helping with interpretation as well.
Okay, great. Thank you. I have made you a co-host.
Thank you. Such an honor.
I know it's like the new leader of the group. I don't know. Zoom is such a weird place sometimes.
It is, isn't it? And it's wonderful.
Sarah, are you on the line?
Yeah, sorry, I was muted. Yes, I'm Sarah Bielma. I'll be doing the second portion of it, the interpretation.
Okay, Sarah, I'm going to make you a co-host as well so that you can unmute yourself when necessary.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sharon Navas. I am the co-founder and executive director of the Equity in Education Coalition. Buenas tardes todos, yo soy Sharon Navas, yo soy la directora de la organización, la Coalición para Equidad en la Educación Pública. I want to thank everyone for coming today. We're honored and privileged to have Jorge Barron from the Northwest Immigrant Rights Project here with us today to talk about all things DACA, immigrants' rights in the Northwest. A couple of things for everyone to know, and I will put this in the chat. There is if you see at the top, it says live streaming on otter.ai. That is our closed captioning, which is currently only available in English. But we will be translating to Spanish as soon as the lunch and learn is over this afternoon. Gracias por venir hoy. Vamos a pedirles a todos que permanezcan en silencio y si tienen preguntas, por favor, escríbalos en el chat. Thank you for coming today. We are going to ask everyone to stay on mute. If you have questions, please type them into the chat. Sarah and Oscar, are you ready?
I am ready. I just wanted to go over how
Yeah.
do you guys want me to start interpreting? There are two different methods. I can do simultaneously, or I can do simultaneous means as you speak, I speak, but that tends to be confusing sometimes. And there is also another system that is called continuous interpretation, which you say something, I wait for you to stop, and then I go and interpret what you said. And I don't know what time you want me to start interpreting.
Jorge, are you okay doing the continuous interpretation?
I'm happy to do whatever you would prefer. Either way, it works with me.
Okay, if we could do the continuous interpretation, just keep in mind that you need to stop every once in a while so that we can, so Oscar and Sarah, if we could do the continuous interpretation, that would be great. Why am I still? Yeah.
Okay.
Fine.
Perfect. Thank you. Jorge, if you would please let us know who you are and who NERP is, and then I've got some questions for you.
Wonderful. Well, hello, everyone. My name is Jorge Barron. I'm the Executive Director of the Northwest Immigrant Rights Project.
Oscar, you're on.
Hola a todos, mi nombre es Jorge Barón, soy la persona ejecutiva del Northwest Immigrant Project.
And we are a statewide nonprofit organization that provides immigration and legal services here in the state of Washington. We've been around since 1984, and our primary areas of work are on providing direct immigration and legal services, providing systemic advocacy to change the immigration system, as well as providing community education on immigration matters.
Nosotros somos una entidad sin fines de fondo lucrativo a nivel estatal. Nosotros hemos estado ayudando a las comunidades tanto en abogacía, en acceso directo a la representación legal desde 1984.
And I am very grateful for the opportunity to talk to all of you today, and appreciate the invitation to be part of the lunch. And Sharon, I'll turn it back over to you for the questions. So,
Estoy muy agradecido por esta invitación y les regreso el turno para que pueda usted seguir con lo de este almuerzo.
Jorge, one of the questions that we get often is, what is DACA and what is the impact to students' education?
Una de las preguntas que tenemos para Jorge es ¿qué es DACA y cuál es el impacto en la inmigración para nuestros estudiantes?
okay, well, thank you for that. And so for those of you that are not familiar with the DACA program, it stands for the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, and it was a program that really was the result of advocacy by undocumented young people themselves in 2010, 2011, that essentially forced President Obama to create this program in June 2012.
Este programa de acción deferida para las llegadas de infantes fue promulgada desde el 2010, del 2010 y el 2011, que prácticamente forzó la mano del presidente Obama en aquel entonces a formar parte de este programa para ayudar a los infantes que estén siendo educados.
And how many children does that affect here in Washington State?
¿Cuántas personas impacta aquí en el estado de Washington?
So the DACA program, and it's important to note that a lot of the people in the DACA program now are not children anymore. They might have arrived in the United States as children, but many of them are now older and have their own families. It impacted, so the number of people who applied for the program here in Washington and benefited from the program was around 18,000, but there were probably another 10,000 who could have qualified for the program and ultimately did not apply. So we think that the total number of people who might be eligible for the DACA program in Washington State is around 28,000.
Una cosa que quería aclarar, tal vez las personas que se están beneficiando de este programa de acción deferida llegaron como infantes, pero ya no son infantes. Muchos de ellos inclusive ya son hasta padres de familia. Una de las cosas que sabemos nosotros es de que aplicaron y calificaron 18,000 personas bajo este programa, pero también sabemos que hay que no aplicaron 10,000 personas para este programa, lo que nos deja saber que un estimado aproximadamente de 28,000 personas se pudieron haber beneficiado en el estado de Washington.
Jorge, can you tell us if there are any protections for undocumented students or families here in Washington State besides DACA?
Jorge, ¿nos podrías decir si hay alguna protección, aparte de los estudiantes que están beneficiados de DACA, personas que son inmigrantes que tal vez no tengan ningún estatus?
Yes, I think this is one of the difficult parts of immigration law, is that being able to identify whether somebody qualifies for a protection is a kind of a complicated issue, and a lot of the work that we do is trying to figure that out for an individual applicant.
Una de las cosas que es muy difícil de saber es cuándo una persona puede calificar para poder tener un tipo de protección, y es una de las cosas que nosotros nos enfocamos en tratar de obtener la información necesaria para ver si hay una protección.
And so just to give you, for example, a couple of examples, there are some protections under immigration law for victims of crime. And so we sometimes identify people who, for example, have been victims of domestic violence, sexual assault, other serious crimes, who could qualify, who are currently undocumented, but might qualify for a protection like that is known as the U visa.
Hay otros programas también que pueden ayudar a las personas que están indocumentadas, tales como víctimas de crimen, y estas personas son las que son víctimas de algún tipo de abuso doméstico o abuso sexual. Estos también podrían beneficiar a otro tipo de personas.
And then we have some families where somebody might be eligible to obtain immigration status because of a family relationship, because they have parents or siblings, well, mostly parents or spouses who are children, who are U.S. citizens or who are permanent residents, and so they may qualify for immigration status that way.
También hay otro grupo de personas que se podrían beneficiar bajo algún tipo de protección, y esto sería por tipo familiar, ya sea hermanos, padres, bueno, en realidad es más padres, algún tipo, por ejemplo, personas que tienen residencia aquí en Estados Unidos, o inclusive el esposo o hijos que pudieran aplicar para sus padres.
And so I think the hard part is that there are people in the community, including students and other individuals who may currently be undocumented and may have a pathway to be able to get immigration status, but it's not easy always to identify who does have a pathway and how realistic that pathway may be, because somebody, for example, may be married to a U.S. citizen and may possibly have a way to get immigration status, but because of circumstances in their case, for example, they might have had a prior deportation or something like that, that will actually make it very difficult for them to be able to pursue that.
Para también ayudar a otras personas bajo hay personas que están, por ejemplo, indocumentadas que pudieran tener algún tipo de recurso legal para poder tratar de tener algún tipo de protección. Un ejemplo que les podría dar es una persona que está casada con una ciudadano americano o ciudadana americana, pero tal vez esta persona tuvo algún tipo de problemas en el pasado, o tal vez tuvo algún tipo de deportación en el pasado, y esto lo hace un poquito difícil el poder saber quién realmente califica o no.
And so a lot of the work that we try to do, and that is unfortunately complicated, is to interview people and identify what options they may have. And unfortunately, frequently we have to tell them that there isn't a current pathway under current immigration laws, or that it's going to take a very long time to have a pathway to be able to gain immigration status.
Y una de las cosas más difíciles es obtener esta información para ver si hay algún tipo de beneficio para estas personas, pero a veces es complicado el proceso, y desafortunadamente a veces tenemos que decirle a las personas que en este momento no hay ningún tipo de acción que se pueda tomar para ayudarlos en este camino para algún tipo de protección.
Jorge, is being undocumented or being in this country without documentation a criminal offense?
Jorge, disculpa, el estar aquí en este país indocumentado es algún tipo de, pueden ser categorizados como criminales?
So no, the fact that somebody has no current immigration status is not a criminal offense. People have, it's considered a civil violation of immigration law. There are some things that are qualified as criminal offenses in the immigration law. For example, if somebody has been deported previously and they returned without permission, they could be charged with a criminal offense. But most people who are in the country without permission are in violation of civil immigration law, not criminal provisions of immigration law.
No, para contestar tu pregunta es no. No hay ninguna violación. El estar indocumentado no es ninguna violación criminal, a menos de que la persona haya sido deportada. Lo que amontaría a una persona indocumentada sería una violación civil bajo el Código de Inmigración, pero no criminal.
Jorge, how busy have you and NERP been in the last 4 years?
¿Qué tan ocupado has estado tú, Jorge, en los últimos 4 años?
Well, unfortunately, we've been very busy, and I think it's been, I would say, a combination of things. So first of all, there has been a lot of issues that have emerged for the communities we serve. Certainly under this administration, there have been huge challenges, such as the president trying to terminate the DACA program. Let me pause there for Oscar.
Thank you. Desafortunadamente hemos estado bastante ocupados, especialmente con esta administración que ha querido inclusive quitar la protección de DACA.
But on top of that, I think the thing that doesn't get enough attention is there's been kind of like the big headlines, right, of the DACA program. There's been the family separation, which was an issue for us. There's been the situation at the border. But there's in all these issues, there's also, and public charge is the other big sort of headline item. But there's been in the individual applications, the administration has thrown all these obstacles and made it more difficult for people to be able to apply. And just the forms are longer. The requests that they ask for more evidence, for more paperwork than they used to. And so even the people who weren't blocked from being able to get immigration status, it's taking them much longer and much more work to be able to get that green card for the people who happen to be lucky enough to be eligible.
Una de las cosas que ha estado pasando es que no nada más está pasando lo que está pasando con los jóvenes de DACA, sino que hay otras cosas que no realmente a veces no salen a la luz del día, porque la mayoría de la atención está llevándose lo de DACA. Pero, por ejemplo, podemos hablar de la separación familiar en la frontera. Podemos también a decir de las personas que han aplicado y simplemente el monto de papeleo que tienen que hacer es demasiado. Han incrementado las formas que tienen que llenar, han pedido más evidencia, más papeleo, y simplemente lo están haciendo más difícil para las personas que aún han calificado en el pasado.
And the last thing I would say is just that the level of uncertainty about things, right? So, we could talk even more about the uncertainty around the DACA program and the Supreme Court decision, for example, and all that's led, but also things like with public charge, questions about whether I can, obtain or pursue public benefits. And so a lot of questions that we just didn't have to answer before.
Y esto va parte de tu respuesta, que hemos estado tan ocupados porque hemos tenido que, por ejemplo, explicar acerca de los cargos públicos que hay, si pueden las personas aplicar para algún tipo de beneficio. I'm sorry, Jorge, I missed the first part.
Oh, I think I was just saying that just having to answer questions and the uncertainty of all of these changes has created a lot of questions for community members.
Y el no estar seguro de lo que está pasando, de lo que va a pasar, nos ha provocado contestar más preguntas de lo normal.
Jorge, can you mentioned public charge a couple of times. Could you explain what that is?
Jorge, tú mencionaste cargo público un par de veces. ¿Nos podrías explicar qué es eso?
Of course. It's a complicated subject, and so I beg your forgiveness in having to go into a little bit of weeds, because most of the time I try to avoid doing that in immigration law. But I'm sorry, Oscar, go ahead.
O sea que, disculpa, ok, esto de cargo público es un poquito complicado, lo que nos tendría que llevar a una plática a la raíz de lo que es la ley inmigratoria. A veces trato de no pasar mucho tiempo en eso, pero tendríamos que hablar, realmente irnos a la raíz de todo esto.
So public charge is a concept that's been written into immigration law since the 19th century. And the concept, and to be honest, I think it comes from very much, racist origins, that the idea was that we were going to keep out of the country people that we considered to be, lazy. I mean, I think that's the way that I think that people described it. And so, it was written into immigration law at a time when the concept was that people were not going to work hard, and we wanted to keep those people out of the United States.
Y este es un concepto que viene desde el siglo XIX, que en pocas palabras es un concepto racista que aplica o define de querer sacar a las personas que son perezosas. Entonces, este tipo de concepto se introdujo a la ley migratoria para de alguna manera excluir a esas personas del proceso migratorio.
And so while that phrase had stayed in the immigration laws until 2018, in the last like 4 or 5 decades, the way that had been read had been very, very narrowly. And it had basically just meant that we were requiring people who were coming to the United States through family and employment visas to show that they had somebody in the United States who could, as the term is used, sponsor them. So who could kind of commit to supporting them economically when they were here.
Entonces, en las últimas 4 décadas, hablando de 2018, la definición de esta palabra es el requerir a las personas que están tratando de inmigrar a los Estados Unidos, que sean patrocinados por un miembro familiar, específicamente que alguien que los pudiera sostener por medio del proceso legal que están llevando.
And so what happened was that the Trump administration, when they came in, they decided to use that concept that was written to immigration law and read it much more broadly. And what has happened is that they eventually, after a lot of fights, were able to put in place a new regulation that uses that concept of public charge and redefines it to potentially exclude a lot more people than before from being able to obtain a green card, which is the first step towards permanent residence. It's called lawful permanent residence, and it's the first step for people to be able to become U.S. citizens.
Entonces, la administración de Trump quiso ampliar esta definición y no nada más tenerla en una visión más corta, sino que la ampliaron para que pudieran ellos hacer, para poder excluir a más personas de este proceso. Y para poder obtener su residencia permanente, que es uno de los primeros pasos para poder llegar a la ciudadanía.
And I think that the key thing that I hope all of you understand about this public charge issue is this: that most of the attention has focused on the fact that most people think of the public charge rule as punishing people because they pursued government benefits. And the fact is that that part of the rule is more about causing fear. That part of the rule is actually probably not going to impact people, but there are other parts of the rule that are probably going to be much more harmful and are getting actually less attention.
Y una de las cosas que está pasando es de que las personas que están utilizando este cargo público, las personas están siendo atemorizadas porque piensan que el pedir beneficios gubernamentales pudiera afectarlo, pero eso es nada más diseñado para causar temor. En realidad hay otras cosas que deberíamos tener más atención.
And the reason for that, to try to explain it to all of you, is that the public benefits that are covered by the public charge rule are federal benefits, and most undocumented people don't qualify for the list, at least the benefits that are listed, and so they're not going to be able to get harmed because they're not going to qualify for those benefits that are in the public charge rule.
Una de las cosas que pasa es de que muchos de estos beneficios que estamos hablando son beneficios federales y las personas que son indocumentadas realmente no califican para este tipo de beneficios y es por eso que las personas están atemorizadas.
But that was the point. The administration knew that if they did this, they would cause fear regarding other programs. And so the fear in the community is that if I apply for state benefits, if I apply for even going to a food bank, right, which are not covered by the public charge rule, but the perception in the community was what is leading people to not apply for things that they're actually eligible for because of they've heard of the federal public charge rule, and that's it was I want to emphasize it was intended by the administration to do that, even though they didn't go that far, frankly, because I think that would have made them even more subject to a legal challenge if they had gone beyond the federal benefits.
Y una de las cosas que quiero enfatizar es de que la causa del temor de muchas de las personas que realmente tienen temor a buscar o aplicar por beneficios estatales, inclusive ir a pedir comida en un banco de comida, porque tienen temor de meterse en problemas, pero esa fue una de las cosas estratégicas de esta administración que lo utilizó para quitar la mirada de otros programas.
But I do want to emphasize that what I'm not trying to say is that the public charge rule is not a problem. What I'm trying to say is that the public charge rule is a problem in other ways, because the public charge rule does have aspects of it that don't get as much attention, but that say, for example, that people will be considered under something that's described as the totality of the circumstances test, where they will consider things like your income, your ability to speak English, your ability to how steady of employment you have had. And it's unclear exactly, none of those things are going to necessarily disqualify you or not, but it's all, going to be measured by an immigration officer in a way that we're deeply concerned will be discriminatory and will lead to people being denied green cards in an unfair way.
Y la cosa que quería enfatizar es de que no es que el cargo público no esté causando problemas, si lo está haciendo en ciertas maneras. Por ejemplo, una de las cosas que se tiene que tomar en cuenta al estar haciendo este proceso es, ellos tienen que tomar en cuenta el ingreso total, la habilidad de hablar inglés, la habilidad de qué tan seguro está su trabajo. Entonces son estas cosas que un agente de migración tiene que considerar, y una de las cosas que nos tienen preocupados es de que cuando se estén haciendo este tipo de estudios, que vayan a ser un poco racistas a las personas que están tratando de aplicar.
And so I think where I would sort of close this part on the public charge rule is that what I would say is that I think it's a profoundly negative situation for the immigrant community, but the impact is perhaps different than I think a lot of people advertise, because the direct impact of the rule is going to be denying people green cards for reasons other than the public benefits, and the indirect impact is scaring people from pursuing benefits that are probably not going to harm them, but they've been scared off by this rule from actually being able to pursue.
Y quisiera cerrar con esto, de que el impacto que está haciendo, hay dos tipos de impacto, un impacto directo y uno indirecto. El impacto directo es de que probablemente el cargo público pueda ser factor en esta decisión, pero perdón, pero lo indirecto sería de que las personas no estén pensando que van a ser negada su tarjeta de residencia por haber aplicado por uno de esos programas, pero que en realidad realmente no sería la razón por la cual son negadas.
Jorge, we have a question in the chat from Alicia. The public benefits issue, in addition to fear to the undocumented community, feels like more of a dog whistle to rile up Trump's base to support racist policies. Do you feel that this is accurate?
Jorge, una de las cosas que tenemos es una pregunta en el chat acerca del cargo público. ¿Y tú crees que esto que están haciendo es simplemente como para que la base de la administración de Trump simplemente esté más engreída y que esté causando este tipo de pandemonia en la comunidad?
So I agree with this. I mean, it completely, and I think, you know, this has been a well documented part of the strategy for the Trump administration has been to signal to its political base that they are targeting immigrants. And, you know, from the very first, you know, campaign speech that the president gave, even was focusing on the famous speech where he referred to Mexican immigrants as, you know, murderers and rapists. And this is kind of furthering that and talking about people who are going to come and take advantage of the country somehow. And so I do think that it's definitely part of that. But I also think that the first part of your point is important, which is that it's not just that. It is going to have an actual harmful effect on families for the two reasons that I talked about, for the fear, and because it's actually going to enable them to deny green cards to people who would otherwise get them.
Estoy totalmente de acuerdo. Es una de las cosas que esta administración intentó hacer como estrategia inclusive desde el primer discurso que dio Trump acerca de los mexicanos siendo inmigrantes perezosos o que son delincuentes. Esto creo que va a tener una consecuencia no nada más en este momento, sino que en el futuro, porque realmente está afectando a la comunidad hispana.
Thank you, Jorge. Oscar, gracias. One of the questions that we have is some of our families have disappeared from the area. We know that COVID is negatively affecting a lot of our undocumented families. How have you seen school buildings and school districts have you seen school districts have a relationship with ICE?
Como muchas de nuestras comunidad ha sido desaparecida especialmente por lo de esta situación de COVID. ¿Tú has visto o has sabido si algún distrito escolar ha estado participando juntamente con ICE?
So I haven't seen a lot of examples of active collaboration between school officials. We have had situations where law enforcement that was connected to the school, whether it's school resource officer or somebody from the local police department that was connected to the school, may have been in contact with ICE. We see much more situations where the schools have been proactive and helpful in supporting their students. And I obviously we would be supportive of schools being very protective of their students and serving as a place where students and families can be safe.
No he visto ninguna participación activa de ningún distrito escolar. Tal vez si hubo algo pudiera haber sido indirectamente, tal vez por medio de un oficial, un policía oficial conectado con la escuela que probablemente estuviera activo colaborando con esta migración. Pero creo que han sido los distritos escolares han sido muy proactivos en mantener a nuestros estudiantes seguros y aprendiendo.
Jorge, we have another question about public charge. Is it or can it be connected to undocumented students receiving free or reduced lunch at school?
Jorge, tenemos otra pregunta en el chat. Si el cargo público podría ser conectado con los estudiantes que están recibiendo alimentos reducidos.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that question to help clarify that because there's actually a couple of important things to cover there. So even before the pandemic and when we had kind of what I would call regular sort of school settings, right, where students were physically able to be in school, the students receiving the kind of free and reduced school lunches were not, this was not covered by the public charge rule, right? And so there was no, from the immigration side, there was no reason for people to decline those benefits. Those were not covered. It was very clear, but we did hear. And so I think it's important to clarify that the fear was out there, right? So there were rumors about that, and we know there were a lot of families who were concerned about that. So, but those fears were not justified because receiving that kind of benefit would not have any impact on either the students or the parents being able to apply for green cards in the future under the public charge rule.
Gracias por esa pregunta y qué bueno que la hicieron porque es un buen momento para clarificar algo. Bajo este estado de cargo público, realmente los almuerzos gratis o reducidos no califican, no caen en esta determinación. Donde las personas que apliquen para ello puedan tener alguna negatividad en sus aplicaciones migratorias. Pero sí hubo bastante temor pensando las personas que si aplicaban podía reflectar negativamente en su estado migratorio, ya sea para ayudar al estudiante o a los padres.
And I just want to add to that. So the other thing that is important for all of you to know is that, as I'm sure many of you know, we're now implementing a new system or a new benefit or similar benefit for those same families called pandemic EBT, mm-hmm. which is for families who would have otherwise received that kind of assistance in the school, but because the kids were not in school, are now being asked to apply for this benefit that in many ways looks and seems like food stamps. And the problem with that is that the regular federal food stamp benefit is covered by public charge. And so a lot of people were concerned, does this new benefit fall into that same category and could there be a risk? And one of the things that I wanted to clarify is that even that benefit, the pandemic EBT, is not covered by public charge. And so again, people should not be concerned about applying for that benefit because it is not subject to the public charge.
Una de las cosas que quería añadir a un poquito más acerca de esto es de que por parte de la pandemia se cerraron las escuelas y muchas personas que calificaban para los almuerzos reducidos o gratis, sus hijos dejaron de ir a la escuela. Entonces salió un nuevo programa que se llama Pandemia EBT, que en muchos aspectos se mira igual y parece igual que cupones de alimento, que es un programa federal. Y estos cupones médicos sí caen bajo el cargo público. Pero este nuevo programa que se mira igual que unos cupones de alimento, no son parte del cargo público. Entonces las personas no deberían de tener miedo en aplicar y calificar para uno de estos beneficios.
I work with Sharon at EEC, and she had to step out for a small emergency.
So I'm having a hard time hearing you.
Is this better? Yeah. Hi, my name is Risa, and I work for the Equity and Education Coalition. Sharon is having a bit of a small emergency, so I'm going to try and step in for a little bit. Another question, one that I had, were what are schools' abilities to prevent ICE from school grounds and nearby areas?
Oscar, did you catch that?
I'm sorry. I tried to.
Yo la puedo repetir en español rápidamente. La pregunta es si pueden, ¿qué pueden hacer las escuelas y los distritos escolares de prevenir al servicio de inmigración, a ICE, de entrar en las escuelas? So now I'll switch to English for the answer, Oscar, and I'll let you go back to interpret me.
Thank you.
So there are a lot of things that the schools can do. So, schools and school districts are control their spaces, and ICE can't go into a private area unless they have a judicial search warrant. And so I think one of the things that schools can do, and I know many local districts have policies that make it clear that they will not give permission for ICE to come into their school buildings unless they have such a warrant. And that is something that they can do, because school districts, like any other entity, can give permission or not to somebody to come in. And in some places, there have been situations where schools have said, yes, we'll allow you to come in. So, but that of course causes tremendous fear, and negative consequences, and undermines the ability of the school district to gain trust. So we think that having policies that make it clear that the school is not going to allow ICE into their facilities is unless they have a judicial warrant, is an important step in gaining that trust.
Hay muchas cosas que realmente los distritos escolares, tanto como las escuelas, pueden hacer, porque ellos tienen autoridad bajo su propiedad. Entonces, si las escuelas deciden o no dar acceso a inmigración, es parte de las escuelas, pero creo que muchas de las escuelas y distritos han estado muy proactivos en tratar de proteger a los estudiantes. A menos que inmigración tenga una orden judicial de añadimiento de morada, ellos pueden entrar, pero si ellos no tienen ninguna orden judicial donde les den permiso a entrar a las escuelas muchas veces no permiten eso. En raros casos lo ha habido, pero una vez que esto pasa, se pierde la confianza realmente, tanto en la escuela como en el distrito, y eso podría causar problemas. Una de las cosas que podríamos hacer es tener un tipo de pólizas donde no se permita la entrada a la migración a los escuelas o distritos escolares.
One more question from the chat. This is from a teacher in the Highline School District. One of our families has disappeared. We are concerned that they are being deported. How can teachers support undocumented families, and how can we find out what happened to them?
Tenemos otra pregunta de parte del chat. Ella es una maestra en el Distrito Escolar de Highline. Ella dice que una de las familias, de sus familias de ahí, están siendo desaparecidas. No sabemos si están siendo deportadas o qué es lo que está pasando. ¿Qué es lo que podríamos nosotros, para saber dónde están ellos o qué está pasando? ¿Y qué podemos hacer para ayudar?
Well, I appreciate that question, and I hope people understand that this is a time of great difficulty for families, and particularly for families with undocumented community members. I tell people that it's kind of like 4 different attacks. There's the Trump administration and its policies. There's the pandemic that's hitting them with disproportionate impact. We're seeing like very high numbers. I mean, as many of you know, Latinx families in Washington State are the biggest group in terms of people who've been impacted by COVID, despite the fact that we're only 13% of the population. So we're like at 40. I think the last number I saw was 43% of the infections, perhaps even higher by now. And then we have the economic impact, right, of losing jobs when people are not eligible. So undocumented community members are not eligible for unemployment insurance. So I might have been working for 20 years as an undocumented worker, paying into the unemployment insurance system through my taxes, and yet the day that I need unemployment insurance, I don't qualify. They're not eligible for the stimulus payments that many of us got from the government. And so that's the third impact. And then the fourth is just the exclusion from those provisions, right? The fact that when you get the stimulus payments, the Congress excluded them from those protections. And so it's just a very unsettling time. Oscar, I'll pause for you. And
Okay, thank you. Una de las cosas que yo me digo, gracias por la pregunta, y una de las cosas que yo digo es de que tenemos cuatro niveles que nos están atacando acá. Uno es la administración de Trump y todas las implementaciones que ellos han puesto para separar familias y todo esto. La segunda viene siendo la pandemia y la consecuencia de la pandemia que ha causado en la comunidad hispana, siendo que nosotros somos una minoría, somos casi la mayoría que hemos sido impactados, casi el 43% de la última vez que llegué, que ha impactado a pacientes de COVID-19. La otra es el impacto económico que está sucediendo en nuestras familias, que personas que han, por ejemplo, trabajado por 20 años siendo indocumentados en este país, quitándole sus impuestos, pagando a un sistema de desempleo del cual no pueden participar porque no tienen la documentación necesaria para participar de los beneficios de desempleo. La otra es que los estímulos que pasaron, por ejemplo, todos nos llegaron un cheque de estímulo y personas que están indocumentadas no recibieron ningún tipo de beneficio de estímulo. Y la otra, pues, es la exclusión de parte del Congreso o de parte del Senado acerca de de no permitir que estas personas indocumentadas tengan estos beneficios.
And so, but I do want to get to answer the actual question of what you can do to support. And what I would say is that, understanding that reality and knowing that people are, very much intensely looking for resources that can help them. And so I'll just name a few things. So one is that NERP is part of a broader network of organizations known as the Washington Immigrant Solidarity Network, or WISN, and I'll put the website on the chat box in a minute. That has been running a hotline that originally was intended for people to report immigration raids and immigration enforcement, but has also now expanded to serve as a point for people to find out about resources that undocumented people may be eligible for. And so spreading the word about that resource is one thing, and I'll get to more in a second.
Para contestar la pregunta, en el estado de Washington hay una coalición que se llama Washington State I couldn't get the name, I'm sorry.
La Red de Solidaridad de Inmigrantes de Washington.
There we go. Que estos también tienen una línea de ayuda que antes era utilizada para reportar cuando había redadas, dónde había redadas. Ahora se está utilizando para poder obtener ayuda de varias cosas.
So that is one thing that people can do, is to make sure that people in the community and students and families know about this resource. And I always tell people, don't make assumptions that people are undocumented or they're not undocumented because they speak Spanish only or because they speak English well, for example, that they're not undocumented. There's a lot of people that are without immigration status. So spreading the information widely is important.
Es importante que las personas no asuman nada de ninguna persona. El simple hecho de que una persona no hable inglés no puede significar que esté indocumentada. También el asumir que una persona hable perfecto inglés, a lo mejor puede ser que también esta persona esté indocumentada. Es importante que nosotros estemos comunicando y dándole saber a las personas dónde hay ayuda.
There's other things that I would point to in terms of ways that you can support undocumented families here in Washington, including families that you're directly working with. So as part of WISN, for example, for those families where there has been somebody who's been detained by immigration, one of the things that impacts a lot of families is the fact that they can't pay for bond. And so we see situations where a family member has been detained, is in the Tacoma Detention Center, and they're, not everybody's eligible for a bond, but families, but many people are eligible. And so the judge gives them a bond, but the bond can be very high, $10,000, $15,000 that, a lot of families cannot afford. And so one of the things that WISN has been working on has been a Fair Fight Bond Fund that it runs. And I see Andrea's on the call today, who's done a lot of great work to help support and create that as a resource. So that is one way that people in the community, both alerting people that that's a resource, but helping get the word out about the need for resources to help those families get out, is another important thing.
Un punto muy importante es poder, por ejemplo, poder ayudar a las personas a tratar de expandir la información acerca de diferentes ayudas. Por ejemplo, lo que estaba diciendo de Washer es acerca de que esta organización a veces puede ayudar a las familias que no pueden alcanzar una fianza porque son detenidos por la inmigración y llegan con el juez y el juez les puede dar una fianza muy alta y no tienen dinero para pagarla. Entonces, el tratar de comunicar a las personas las diferentes organizaciones donde pueden obtener algún tipo de ayuda es muy importante para nosotros para poder ayudar a las familias, especialmente a las familias con las que tú trabajas.
And the last thing that I would bring up is your own individual advocacy with our public officials and leaders, because some of these policies that we're talking about are being debated, and there are issues that are literally, being discussed right now. So I mentioned, for example, the fact that undocumented people and their families. So it's important to note that if you're a family where you have, for example, one undocumented parent, the other parent's a U.S. citizen, and you have, 3 U.S. citizen children, the entire family was excluded. Even the U.S. citizen children and the U.S. citizen spouse were excluded from the stimulus tax payments because there was just one undocumented community member in the family, one undocumented parent. That is being discussed in Congress as to whether in the next round of stimulus payments, they will have the same exclusion. And the House has already passed a version of the bill that would allow those benefits to go to those families, but it's up to the Senate. And so we are encouraging people to let our senators know that this is an issue that's important for us to address in this next round of legislation.
El otro punto que quisiera tomar en cuenta es la abogacía personal, el hablar con nuestros representantes y nuestros líderes, especialmente en estos días que cuando estuvo el paquete de estímulo en todo Estados Unidos, si había una familia donde un padre era indocumentado, el padre o la madre eran ciudadanos o tenían hijos ciudadanos americanos, fueron excluidos del paquete de auxilio económico que recibimos muchos. Entonces, nuestra abogacía personal tiene que ser para poder decirle a nuestros senadores, a nuestros congresistas, de que no es justo que esto suceda. Y inclusive ya pasó en el Congreso, ya pasó el segundo proyecto de ayuda, donde probablemente van a ser excluidos otra vez. Entonces es necesario que levantemos nuestra voz para ser escuchados.
And I will just say that there is a ton of other, small and big ways that you can help. Just today, there is a deadline to submit comments for an asylum proposal that the administration has put out as a proposal. It's not final yet, but they're asking for public comments. They give a very short timeline to submit those comments, only 30 days. Normally this gets a 60-day comment period. They only made it 30 days. Deadline's tonight. If you have a few minutes tonight, I'll put the link in the chat box to submit a comment to say, we oppose this. This is the kind of stuff that's going to harm family members that are right now in our communities that may be seeking asylum and that are going to be deprived of the opportunity to do that. There's also a proposal before the governor to create a fund to support undocumented families here at the state level. So there's a couple of, there's a lot of, again, small but important ways that you can personally advocate for some of the families that many of you are working with in terms of the policies that are being created.
Hay varias maneras de cómo ayudar, puede ser una manera pequeña o una manera grande. Por ejemplo, el día de hoy tenemos la opción y un poquito más voy a poner el enlace acerca de estos comentarios que están habiendo esta administración, que usualmente los comentarios que se dan permiso para 60 días, pero por algún motivo esto solamente se le dio 30, donde nosotros podemos decir que no estamos de acuerdo con lo que está sucediendo. La otra sería en la parte del Estado, el gobernador se le está haciendo una propuesta, todavía no es ley, pero es una propuesta de que pueda ayudar a las familias con padres indocumentados.
So I would just encourage you to do that. And again, on the individual level with individual families, welcome you to connect families with resources, with our organization. If they need legal assistance, we always do ask people to be patient because as we talked about in the beginning, our level of calls has definitely increased. And so it often might take some time, particularly for people who are not yet detained or who are not facing an imminent deportation hearing, for us to be able to do an intake. But we definitely want people to know that there are a lot of resources in the community.
Y si usted es miembro por parte de su familia, también puede ayudar a expandir la voz, de donde podemos dar información a nuestra comunidad, especialmente si una persona está haciendo o no está todavía siendo detenida. Hay muchas maneras que podemos hacer. Por ejemplo, nosotros les decimos, nuestra organización, les podemos ayudar, pero les pedimos que tengan paciencia. Como les dije en el principio, estamos muy ocupados en estos días. And I would like
Oscar,
to...
do you want to take a break?
Yeah, I was going to say that Sarah, if you can help me now.
Yeah,
I got
say the same thing.
I got your back, Oscar.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Okay, I just need shorter phrases. I don't have such a great memory like Oscar does.
We'll do that.
Okay, thank you.
Jorge, there is a comment here in the chat. I'm not going to read the whole comment because it's pretty long, but it's coming from someone who is a Japanese American Jew that feels the situation that's happening in terms of adult and children detainees is very similar to what Japanese American ancestors endured in the US. Go ahead, Sarah.
Porque aquí hay un comentario sobre una persona japonés y judía. Sorry, I lost myself. What was
That's
the comment?
Okay.
Yeah.
That the detainees, the adult and children detainees are going through something similar as the Japanese American ancestors.
Los detenidos están pasando algo similar como los ancestres de los japoneses y americanos.
How can we, what can be done to make sure that our folks are taken care of and basic human rights are no longer denied?
¿Qué podemos hacer nosotros para que esta gente sea cuidada y que los derechos humanos básicos no sean rechazados?
Well, I appreciate that question. And, obviously, I want to start by noting that, the experiences of Japanese Americans and people who endured that dark chapter in our history is a unique, experience in our history. But I agree that there's a common thread of oppression and dehumanization of people.
Le agradezco la pregunta. Yo sé que los japoneses y americanos han endurado un capítulo que es oscuro y es una experiencia única. I'm sorry, Jorge, your last phrase.
but I do think that there's a common thread of dehumanizing and devaluing people in what's happening today.
Hay algo aquí en común de lo que está pasando ahora, donde se está devalorizando y deshumaniando a la gente de lo que está pasando en el momento.
So I think in terms of answering your question about what you can do, I think one of the biggest things is speaking out and making sure that what is happening doesn't go unnoticed.
Yo pienso que de lo que ustedes pueden hacer es de hablar, para que las cosas que están pasando no sean cosas que queden sin que la gente se dé cuenta.
As just one example, you know, there are hundreds of people right now detained, you know, for most of us within an hour's drive of here in the Tacoma Detention Center. Many of them have been living in the US for decades. Many of them are vulnerable to serious consequences from COVID. And yet that's what our country, our federal government is doing right now.
Como será ahora, hay cientos de personas que están, que han detenido. Y eso aquí en Tacoma, que es una hora de acá. Y aún con la pandemia de COVID, esta gente son cosas que están empezando a pasar en este momento. Son gente que está, I'm sorry, I'm so rusty, I am so sorry. Son gente que está detenida y esta gente a través del COVID son cosas que ellos no tendrían que estar pasando.
And so I think, you know, part of the question that I think we should all be asking is like, why are we doing this? Because, I mean, I frankly, you know, when I've had the experience of talking to people in detention, you know, I started my work as a staff attorney in the Tacoma office, working with people who are in detention. And, you know, they asked me, why am I in jail? Why am I behind bars? And there's no real answer to that question. And I think that's something that we should be forcing our leaders in our communities to be asking.
Mucha de la gente se pregunta que por qué estoy aquí en la cárcel, por qué me está pasando esto. Cuando yo estaba trabajando como abogado, yo trataba de contestar eso. ¿Por qué estoy en este tipo de situaciones? Y nosotros es donde tenemos que poner la presión a nuestros líderes, a nuestros políticos, que esos tipos de cosas no continúen pasando.
Because this is not how it's always been. I feel like we have, and this is, you know, a component of a larger conversation around, you know, mass incarceration in this country, where I feel like we have come to accept the fact that we have tens of thousands of people in immigration detention centers, you know, millions of people behind bars and jails and prisons, and just it appears that that's just the way it has to be, and it is absolutely not the way it has to be. And in fact, in immigration, we have expanded dramatically the number of people who are detained. We did not used to do this even 20, 30 years ago.
Esto no es la forma que tenía que haber sido. Ahora estamos encarcelando a gente en masa y es una cultura que se está aceptando. La cárcel tiene cientos de miles de personas y ha expandido. 20, 30 años atrás las cosas no eran así.
And so I think that's, you know, I think the concern that was expressed in the comment is valid, that as we've seen throughout the history of this particular country, and really I would say through human history, you know, some really bad things can happen and human rights abuses can happen when people don't speak up, and when you start getting into these massive systems of which dehumanize and which treat other human beings as not worthy of basic human rights.
Y estas son las cosas que nos preocupan. Estamos humanizando a las personas. Son cosas que no eran anteriormente así. Tenemos que nosotros hablar, tenemos que protestar sobre esos tipos de cosas. Estos no son derechos humanos. Go ahead.
I think I'm good.
Jorge, since the beginning of this year, there feels to be a different sense of activism around Black Lives Matter. Go ahead, Sarah.
Desde el principio del año hemos empezado a tener un diferente sentido que las vidas negras importan.
And there is now a call for removing police from our education campuses.
Y ahora hay una llamada de poder sacar a la policía de nuestro sistema educativo.
The LA School District is an example of where the teachers union is pushing to remove police from campuses.
El Distrito Escolar de Los Ángeles, la Unión de Profesoras, están empujando de poder sacar a la policía de los campos escolares.
Do you think, in your opinion, given the relationship between law enforcement and ICE, that connecting with teachers and the unions would be a way for us to remove any participation of ICE on campus?
¿Tú piensas que sacar la conexión entre la policía y ICE hay alguna forma? I'm sorry, repeat that.
If activism between community and teachers and the union would help us remove any connection.
¿Tú piensas que el activismo entre los profesores y las uniones sería alguna forma de poder sacar a la policía y sacar a ICE?
So yes, I think that would be important, because I think that you know, and I appreciate your bringing up the Black Lives Matter, because I think it's an important you know, renewed call, what we've seen in the last few months, that activism, to remind us all of the racism that is both inherent in our society, but actually, frankly, also for within the immigration system, and how Black immigrants in particular are sometimes harmed in like multiple levels beyond what other people are harmed. Let me pause there for a second.
Sí, yo pienso que sí, y agradezco que estamos hablando que las vidas negras son importantes. Esto es un activismo que se está renovando, que el racismo existe en la sociedad. Go ahead.
And but on the question of excluding law enforcement from educational institutions, from the perspective of the work that we do, we absolutely think that it is essential to having, you know, equity and access to education for immigrant community members, because, you know, an interaction with law enforcement that for a U.S. citizen might be very minor, for somebody who's an undocumented individual in the community can trigger, you know, life-altering things. So it might seem like a minor, you know, incident, like somebody was just picked up, and we've seen that so many times where it was a brief interaction, did not lead to a conviction, did not lead to an arrest, but that was the moment when immigration got involved in a case, and that spiraled into a deportation that tore a family apart. And so keeping law enforcement out of the education system is really important as far as immigrant communities are concerned.
Excluyendo a la policía de nuestros distritos escolares es muy importante, porque cuando entramos en un caso donde llegan y arrestan a una persona dentro de las escuelas, esto puede alterar las vidas, se convierte en una alteración de las vidas. Entonces la respuesta sí, de tratar de mantener a la policía fuera de las escuelas es importante, porque son cambios en las vidas en generales cuando las vidas son alteradas en este aspecto.
Jorge, you meet with, hold on, let me start over again. Jorge, there are various teachers and administrators on this call. Go ahead, sir.
Jorge, hay muchas profesoras aquí en esta llamada.
And you meet with thousands of specifically Latinx families.
Y tú te encuentras con miles de familias latinas.
Can you talk to our audience about the dreams and aspirations that our families have for our children when they come to this country?
¿Podrías tú hablar sobre los sueños y las inspiraciones que tienen los niños y sus familias cuando ellos llegan a este país?
Well, you know, there's so many stories that I could tell you and share, and you know, I always think that, you know, when possible, try to have, you know, those individuals share their own stories. But
hay tantas historias que yo podría compartir de los individuales y estas mismas personas que podrían compartir sus propias historias.
But what I can share is that, you know, the common themes are themes that people are pursuing, what I think most of us, you know, if not all of us, want to have, which
Y el
is,
tema es de la gente en común que están tratando de obtener el que todo el mundo quiere tener,
which is, you know, safety,
que
safety
es la
for
seguridad,
themselves
seguridad
and their
para ti
families.
mismo y para sus familias.
It's about having economic opportunity that not just, you know, I'm looking for a better job, but really the ability to really effectively sustain themselves and their families.
Es de tener una oportunidad económica, no solamente para sostenerse ellos mismos, pero también para poder sostener a sus familias.
And I think one of the things that is surprising to a lot of people is how restrictive our immigration system is.
Y yo pienso que una de las cosas que sorprende a muchas de las gente es lo restrictivo que es el sistema de inmigración.
And I'll give you just one example of the kind of conversations that I've had that we often have to have with families here locally.
Y te voy a dar un ejemplo de una de las conversaciones que tenemos que tener con nuestras familias.
A few months ago, I was in this conversation with this family who had been identified. The employer had shared information with ICE that led to them being ultimately not put into deportation proceedings, but fired from their job.
Aquí te voy a compartir una información donde un empleador dio la información a ICE, no de donde lo obtuvo inmigración, pero sí fue despedido de su empleo.
And so I was talking to this family about what options they might have, and this husband and wife, they've both been in the United States for over 30 years.
Entonces yo estaba hablando con esta familia sobre las opciones que podían tener, esposo y esposa, cuál habían estado en este país por más de 30 años.
They themselves are undocumented.
Ellos no tienen documentos,
but their children, and they now have children, and now because they've been in the country for so long, they actually have grandchildren who are U.S. citizens.
Ahora sus hijos, y como ya llevan tanto tiempo en el país, sus nietos son todos ciudadanos americanos.
And so a lot of people would think, well, you know, they've been living here for so long, they have a clean record, you know, surely there must be some way that they can get immigration status.
Entonces muchas personas pueden pensar, ya que llevan aquí tanto tiempo, tienen el récord limpio, entonces tiene que haber alguna forma que ellos puedan recibir una estatua migratoria.
And the thing is that there is a way that they could try to apply for a green card, but let me explain how that would go.
Pero sí hay una forma como ellos podrían aplicar para su tarjeta verde, su green card, y déjeme explicar cómo ese proceso pasaría.
Okay, so the way that they could qualify for a green card is because now I mentioned one of the children are older, and so they have a daughter who's over 21 years of age, who's a U.S. citizen because she was born here.
Entonces, como yo había mencionado, sus hijos ya son mayores, tienen una hija de 21 años y que es ciudadana americana porque nació aquí.
So that daughter could start a process for them to get, a green card. She could file a petition as a adult over 21 U.S. citizen for their parents, and so that could happen.
Esa hija ahora puede pedir a sus padres, poniendo una petición, mandando a pedir a sus padres. Esa es una forma que puede pasar.
But the challenge is that because the parents came here without permission, they cannot get the green card here. They would have to leave the United States to be able to get the green card.
Pero el problema sería acá que como ellos no entraron al país legalmente, ellos tendrían que salir del país para poder obtener su tarjeta verde.
And the moment that they step outside of the United States, they become subject to something in immigration law that's called the 10-year bar, which says that they cannot return to the country for 10 years.
Ahora, el problema es que una vez que ellos salgan del país, ellos para poder obtener su green card, su tarjeta verde, ellos entrarían ¿cómo se llama? Entrarían a la situación donde hay una regulación que es de 10 años, que no pueden volver a entrar al país, volver a entrar al país en 10 años.
And so you can imagine, as I was having this conversation with this couple, when I told them, well, yes, there is a way that you can pursue a green card, but that means that you have to leave the country and stay outside of the country for 10 years and not be able to return in order to get your green card.
Pero te puedes imaginar que cuando yo le estoy diciendo a la familia, sí, hay una forma de cómo tú puedes obtener tu residencia, pero tendrías que salir del país y no podrías regresar al país por 10 años para poder obtener tu residencia.
And some of you might know that for some families, there might be an opportunity to ask for a waiver so that they can return before the 10 years are up.
Y como ustedes saben, hay veces que hay algunas familias, bueno, hay una forma que se llama un waiver, es para que las familias puedan regresar al país, se puede mandar a pedir eso.
But in this particular situation, because the person who's petitioning for the parents is the child, a U.S. citizen, now adult, not really a child anymore, but a daughter who's older, there is no waiver. So this family would have to wait 10 years outside the United States before being able to return legally.
Ahora, porque la persona que está poniendo la petición es la hija mayor de 21 años, ellos no calificarían para el waiver, que se podría pedir que los 10 años no les afectara, porque la petición expuesta por la hija, ellos no calificarían para eso.
And so you can imagine what that family said. We're talking about a couple in their 50s now, late 50s, lived most of their life here, have U.S. citizen children and grandchildren here in the U.S.
Entonces tú te puedes imaginar lo que esa familia ha dicho, que ya tienen hijos y tienen nietos, ya están en sus 50 años y han vivido aquí más de 30 años, lo que ellos contestaron.
Because their choice was basically remaining in the U.S. undocumented with their families, or having to, be separated from their families and return to potentially maybe come back in 10 years.
Entonces, las opciones que ellos tenían era de mantenerse en el país con sus familias sin documentos o irse del país y mantenerse fuera del país por 10 años sin sus familias y sin sus documentos, para obtener sus documentos.
And it's important to understand that 10-year rule, that's a new thing. I mean, relatively new. It came into being in 1996.
Ahora te puedes imaginar que esa regla es más o menos nueva, la regla de los 10 años que tomó efecto en 1996.
And so in the past, that family, would have been able to go, get their green card, get their status, and come back and be reunited with their family.
En el pasado, ellos podrían haber obtenido su residencia, haber salido del país, regresado y haber estado con su familia.
And so, but now we've created the system that people who may have otherwise been able to get a green card are now facing these choices that are not really choices and are just we're forcing them essentially to live undocumented.
Ahora, estas personas que podrían haber tenido una opción de poder haber obtenido su residencia, realmente no son opciones, solamente tenemos obstáculos para que ellos puedan obtener su residencia.
And so I hope that that's just a way to remind you that there are many families in those circumstances, and that's what's driving essentially this form of family separation and real unfairness to a lot of community members who just want to be together with their families and being able to do what they've been doing, which is contributing to our society.
Y espero que esto es un recordamiento de que hay muchas familias en estas mismas situaciones, que donde las familias han querido mantenerse juntas y son familias que han contribuido a nuestra sociedad.
Y Jorge, correct me if I'm wrong, but is it true that the wait to get legal documentation going through the correct channels for Mexico, Central America, and some parts of South America is like 15 years?
Porque corrígeme si estoy equivocada, pero es verdad que la espera para poder obtener tus documentos en México, Centroamérica y en algunas partes de Sudamérica, que la espera puede ser de 15 años.
So yes, it can actually be longer, and I should clarify that this family was actually in the category that there's no wait list for them. So they're in a lucky situation where there's not even a wait list for them, but they still have to deal with the 10-year bar.
Sí, y hay veces que es hasta más tiempo. Como es la familia de que estaba mencionando, para ello no había lista de espera, pero ellos estaban dentro de la policía de los 10 años.
But there are, for some other family relationships, there is a dramatic wait time. And if you want to see how long we're talking about, all you need to do is go to your browser and Google or search for something called the Visa Bulletin.
Y sí, y para otras familias es aún más largo el tiempo. Si tú quieres saber más o menos cuánto es el tiempo de espera, puedes entrar al browser y poder poner, I'm sorry, what was the browser?
It's called Visa Bulletin. Like
Es el boletín de visa.
And this is where the State Department lists how long people, like what applications, when were the applications filed that they're processing right now?
Oh my God.
En este lado es donde donde el Estado pone las aplicaciones que se han puesto y en qué fecha están y cuánto, en la fecha que están procesando las aplicaciones, y ahí vas a poder ver en la lista de espera que estás o que las personas están.
And so you will see that for some places, because it depends on the country that your family member person that's coming is from, there's some dates from Mexico, for example. Right now I'm looking July 8th, 1996.
Aquí hay como ser personas, depende de dónde tú vienes, aquí hay personas como ser de México. Estoy mirando la lista en este momento y puedo ver que hay de julio 8 de 1998 todavía en espera.
Yeah. And so that means that they are now processing applications that were literally filed 24 years ago.
Eso significa que ahorita ellos están viendo aplicaciones que fueron puestas literalmente 24 años atrás.
So some families are having to wait that long to be able to go through the quote unquote legal immigration channels that we have.
Hay familias que tienen que esperar todo ese tiempo para poder entrar en el canal de legalmente poner las aplicaciones.
Jorge, thank you so much for being with us here today. This information, my parents came here without documentation in the 70s, and you know, it's always jarring to hear this information as it's coming out. Thank you so much.
Jorge, gracias por estar aquí con nosotros hoy día. Mi familia llegó aquí, mis padres llegaron aquí en 1970 y para mí siempre es impresionante de ver que las familias tienen que pasar por todo esto para poder legalizarse.
And thank you for the invitation, and a pleasure to be with all of you. And we can, you have my email address I just put on the chat. Feel free to follow up with anything that I didn't get to cover or any individual questions.
Y gracias por la invitación, todo tiene mi información. Y si las personas que no le pude responder tienen mi información donde me pueden mandar un correo electrónico.
Sarah y Oscar, gracias. Thank you so much for being on the call with us. Gracias por todo lo que ustedes hacen para nuestras comunidades. It was a pleasure to have both of you here with us. You've made this such an amazing lunch and learn today. It's our first one being translated, so it's being interpreted. So thank you so much.
No, thank you, and I apologize. I'm
No,
more
you
of a
were great.
simultaneous interpreter. I
Sarah,
am not a
you were
consecutive.
amazing. Look, you were so much better than my Spanglish. We would have been like 12 hours ago. This thing would have been lasting like
Yeah,
17
I
days.
do not do consecutive. I mean, I do simultaneous interpretations.
Well, we'll
Yeah.
figure it out for next time. Gracias
Okay.
a todos. Thank you, Oscar,
Gracias.
Sarah, y Jorge. Velma, thank you so much for getting this going. We will have this on our YouTube here in about an hour or so. We will have the transcription. Yes, Sarah, you're gonna be on YouTube, girl.
No.
You're gonna be famous. Any questions, please send them to me at info. I'll put our address here on the chat. And again, please reach out to Jorge for more information. I put in the donate page for Northwest Immigrant Rights Project. Please donate to NERP and Jorge. They are an amazing organization. Thank you so much. It is always an honor and a pleasure to see all of you. Oscar, Sarah, we will definitely work again together soon. Jorge, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Have a
Thanks,
good day,
everybody.
everybody.
Thank you,
Thank
everyone.
you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.